latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to the Gist on Strat News Global. I am Surya Gangadharan and our focus again this evening is on Sri Lanka. Let's first get a quick update on the current developments there. The Prime Minister's office has said a state of emergency has been declared. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has fled to the Maldives. We've seen all those reports over the last few hours. Prime Minister Wickremesinghe will take over from him as acting president. I'm joined by Dr. Harinda Vidanage, head of the Department of Strategic Studies at the John Kotelawala Defence University in Colombo. Sir, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you for having me, Surya.
So, what happens now that a state of emergency has been declared? What does it mean first of all, and who will enforce it?
When you declare a state of emergency, so law enforcement, people's movement, all the law enforcement duties will be taken over by the military. So the military so they can do all the checkpoints, they can deploy, they can intervene in any civil affair, check people's movements. And so that has been just done, and that is why you see even in Colombo now a lot of military contingents being deployed, so military will spearhead whatever the security needs, requirements in the country when emergency is declared.
So now,
And
correct me if
arrests
I'm
can be made.
wrong.
Yeah, sorry.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Is there an all-party government now in power? How does that political dispensation work?
No, at the moment, as we speak, there is a meeting of all party leaders presided by the speaker, and so they were to convene parliament next week, on the 20th, and where they can go for a election within the parliament. They can select a parliamentarian to be the next president, to cover to the rest of the period of the time that is left from President Rajapaksa's tenure. So that will be a bit of an interesting development, as there are few candidates who have already openly said they are willing to take up that challenge. So till then, what happens is, the Prime Minister, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, is now appointed as the acting president of the country. So he will be the head of government, head of security as well. Yeah.
So assuming all this happens by next week and you have an all-party government in place, does it have the political credibility, to tell the protesters to get off the streets or instruct the army to clear the streets? I mean, these are huge decisions at this point, isn't it?
Yes, I think there is a huge gulf between what the protesters want, and I think what the political leaders are trying to provide. So what has happened, Surya, in Sri Lanka is a deep divide between the civil protesters and the politicians, and this has been brewing for some time. For the last few months, there has been protests for the president to go, and it comes in the back of certain policy decisions that the President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's regime took, as well as the crises that hit Sri Lanka one by one. So from 2019, since Easter Sunday attacks, Sri Lanka has been economically reeling. There is a huge foreign exchange crisis. So we are in three crises simultaneously. We have an energy crisis, which means Sri Lanka has run out of gasoline. We don't have petrol. Petrol is extremely rationed. We don't have, there is a shortage of cooking gas, and there's been frequent power cuts. Sri Lanka has never experienced that together. And then we have a food crisis on top of that, because of the decisions to go organic agriculture,
Yeah.
by the Gotabaya administration, government, Rajapaksa administration. And then of course with the forex crisis, we have a crisis of importation. So there is a food, energy, and financial crisis hitting Sri Lanka simultaneously. And this is unprecedented. In nothing, none of that has happened in our living memory, since the independence of this country. This is what's triggering the protests, and where there is mass scale support at the beginning. Now it's a little bit different. We can come to that a little later, but that is why ordinary Sri Lankans, all went out, mostly took this to the streets, and also carried the slogan of, of the president to leave
Yeah.
his office. So these are all actual grievances, and because even as a civilian, as a civil Sri Lankan, even I am subjected to, so I can actually attest to that.
Mhm. So, how does, assuming there is some kind of a government next week, whom do they talk to? Because it seems a largely leaderless mob over there. Whom do they talk to?
The protest became is a classic postmodern decentralized political activism at play. But what has happened, because it is decentralized in nature, there is a tendency to be hijacked by any political party that has a significant presence on the ground and the voice. So what has happened to the protest is, the protest, though it came out of actual grievances, and of course there are a lot of liberal minded protest young leaders who have been it's been backed by the main opposition, SJB, led by the leader of opposition, Mr. Sajid Premadasa. It's been backed by the JVP, the People's Liberation Front, led by Mr. Andrakumar Disanayaka. But it also has a significant radical uh, left element, the radical left element, which is the vanguard of the protest, which is led by student groups, students, mainly university student groups. The main element is the Inter University Student Federation, called the IUSF, which is actually spearheaded by a radical left wing party called the FSP, the Frontline Socialist Party, led by the former JVP, the People's Liberation Front Central Committee member Kumar Gunaratnam, who was also the head of the militant wing of the JVP. So he has splintered from the JVP and created his own party. It's very analogous to all the ultra left, radical left
Yeah.
groups that are you can see in global politics these days. So they are quite anti-establishment, anti-corporate, and so they have managed to be the vanguard of this protest. And that is why you can see how they operate. They are very fast, they are trained, they are somewhat militant in outlook. They could they could overrun barriers, barricades. They could confront the military establishment, the military security arrangements. So the unfortunately, what most of the people who led the protest, the decentralized leadership itself, is worried that there maybe is a tendency for this protest to be hijacked by radical elements, and these elements would also prefer a certain level of violence. And that is why you can see a lot of breaches and
Yeah.
concentrated attacks on. Now the most current one is the prime minister's office somewhat is under siege, and it was breached, and the security forces managed to remove the protesters, but the protesters are still outside. And you can see it's very well oiled, very well functioning. There's a tactical way of deployment, how the protesters are acting. So this is not this is not
Yeah.
spontaneous. This is very well organized, well trained elements in the front, of course. But as I said, genuine grievances, a lot of people, ordinary Sri Lankans, supported the protest. They went out, but there is at this conjuncture there is a concern that this protest may be hijacked by radical, more organized elements, which is
So
one of the
the
fundamental weaknesses of a decentralized, leaderless
yeah.
movement. Yeah.
Mhm. Do you believe these groups will be armed? I mean, are they? And where is the
Um,
backing coming from? There must be a lot of money required to run these things and organize and coordinate. Where
Yeah,
is
I
the money
think
coming from?
I think the money is coming from various sources. There are just to give you a sense of the money, I had to give you a sense of the picture also. So what has happened in Sri Lanka in the some of the wrong or the fallacies the Rajapaksa administration did was, there was when Professor Rajapaksa came to power, he was backed extremely by the Sinhala Buddhist right wing. There was a huge right wing tendency, and there was that particular, and the political narrative of this country was somewhat sometimes very anti-minority, especially after the Easter Sunday attacks, and before that
Yeah.
there was a targeting of Sri Lankan ordinary Muslim community. Sri Lankan Muslims, was community was very peaceful. They have coexisted with the Sinhala majority. They have lived with the Tamils as well.
Yeah.
So I think the targeting of that, and targeting of of Muslim businesses from you, some of the big corporate giants led by Muslim owners, as well as the middle range apparels, day to day mundane businesses were all targeted. So what you're seeing now is some of the people, that there is some kind of that elements also supporting the protesters. You can see
Mhm.
there is bankrolling of the protest by different parties. There is intelligence reports saying diasporic money as well coming from Australia. Diaspora groups also supporting both both Sri Lankan diaspora is pretty much split: Sinhalese, Tamils, Muslims. I think there is a significant element of the diaspora supporting the movement, local businesses. Then of course, then the opposition also supported. So there was sufficient funding that has come in. But I think now everybody, if you look at the narrative today, even the mainstream supporters of the protests are a little bit concerned now. Are they going a little bit out of hand? Have they created a monster that they couldn't contain? This is the same mistake the Rajapaksa administration did. They created a monster in the context of radical Buddhist right wing Sinhala groups, and which kind of tried to steamroll Sri Lanka's very diverse, very richly diverse, and very coherent tapestry of social relations. So you are seeing now, vice versa, the liberals groups which supported the protests are now worried whether they kind of fed another monster that is a little bit going out of control now.
Mhm. You mentioned diasporic elements. Are they Tamils involved? Are these Sinhalese? Who are they?
No, I can't. No, I can't. What from what I hear from my colleagues, and especially from the intelligence community and all, there is somewhat there is support from Tamil diaspora groups as well, because generally certain, not all Tamil diaspora, but the pro LTT elements are still pretty active, and they're all not the best friends of Rajapaksas at all. So there
Yeah.
is, and also the fact that there is the JVP has significant influence on the labor migrants of Sri Lanka, especially who are in Korea, in the Middle East, and the migrant remittances was a major source of foreign exchange for Sri Lankan state. Apart from the tourism, apart from the apparel exports, I think that has dried down. The ability to weaponize and unionize migrant remittances also was a strength of the opposition groups, and that also led to even the government struggling to raise foreign exchange.
So, these groups, I mean, from what you're telling me, they are organized, there's funding coming in. Are they armed? Is there any indication so far of arms being stockpiled or arms being
No, no,
landed?
I don't think there is any. I mean, of course, there was a worry after Easter Sunday attacks. There was a worry about Islamic. Uh, there was a worry about Islamic radicalization and radical, but that is not the case. There is no evidence to support an armed insurrection or anything like that. I think it's more like the black bloc type kind of urban, hit and run protest, radical protest,
Mhm.
violence that we are witnessing. And the worry, and there is no. I mean, these groups are not socially largely organized in, nationally organized in that context. But in this urban protests, they seem to be following what the protesters were doing during the Arab Spring. Then in Turkey, you can see certain very similar types of strategies, tactics being used. And in all these protests globally, you saw elements, violent elements, soft, soft ally arm, like more homemade stuff, but nothing to directing them to armed uprising.
Mhm. Right, I've covered the Tahrir Square protests in Egypt some years ago, and
Yeah.
it's roughly similar pattern. People mobilizing, moving to areas. I mean, very striking. So, President Gotabaya has fled. Um, was he allowed to flee? Did the military ensure, since he's anyway commander in chief, they were obliged to let him go?
Uh, I think because he's still the commander in chief, so there is a lot of there is a lot of the conversation in Sri Lanka. Why did the military let him go? But the simple thing is he didn't relinquish. He was president when he fled also. So he still remains and he still remains the commander in chief because he has not still submitted his resignation.
Right.
So I think the military has no choice. If he commanded them to, if he gave an order for the air force to fly him out, I think they are compelled to do so. Sri Lanka is, will face a lot of, my major concern, Surya, is the coming political instability that we are coming to, because we will gravely affect our economic situation. Sri
Yeah,
Lanka,
yeah, absolutely.
defaulted a few months back, and is the first country to default in South Asia, so of its loans, and it's running disastrously low on its foreign exchange, foreign reserves, currency reserves. So I think, and Sri Lanka was looking for a bailout, mainly IMF, bailout. So one of the big main kind of conditions of the IMF is you have to have political stability. So I think
Yeah.
this is what Sri Lanka desperately needs. This is why I think the protesters are using the radical groups are using the protesters in a way to not to provide that stability. But I think what Sri Lanka politicians are desperately trying to get is to create at least an interim government, where they are, when, because they need a proper government for, you need a finance minister to do the negotiations. You need that stability. So one of the major concerns for any Sri Lankan at the moment is, rather than the crisis on the streets, is how do we economically
Perform
survive,
economic.
because we have been surviving a lot on Indian credit lines, but
Yeah,
you can't survive on loans, and
true.
you have to find a proper way out. So to do that, you need political stability. Otherwise our economic, we are in a dire economic situation. You will see, if you come to Sri Lanka, you will never, we have never seen kilometers of vehicles waiting to get their fuel. I mean, people have been in queues, but never in our history of living memory have we seen petrol or diesel queues. So they are energy starved. We are starved of foreign exchange, and we are of course facing somewhat of an importation crisis. So you are seeing a lot of goods vanishing from supermarkets. Your supermarket shelves are drying, running, are empty. So this is unprecedented, from a so it's embarrassing, as well as it's quite sad from our perspective. So I think this is what the real crisis in Sri Lanka is. But of course, this is why the people took to streets, because the government made some fundamental policy errors when it came to food security, when it came to energy security, when it
Yeah.
came to how you handle foreign cars, and of course also social cohesion, the relationship between the ethnic groups in Sri Lanka, ethnic and religious groups. We so I think, uh,
All
certain
across, yeah.
all across,
Failures all across.
yeah, it's a sweeping, it's a systemic crisis, and we have been hit and we are in a crisis at a very bad time when
Yeah,
globally food prices
absolutely,
are high, energy prices
absolutely.
are high, and of course, so which means there's a major, and I think India and Sri Lanka Indian relations matter more than ever now.
Yeah,
I mean, you can forget about all, from a Sri Lankan point of view, Sri Lankans have always been weary of India.
yeah,
To be very
absolutely.
frank, Sri Lanka's,
Yes, it's the
strategic
truth.
perspective
Mm.
are very much, are affected by, have from the first prime minister since independence, quickly
Yeah,
did a defense agreement with British because fearing India.
yeah,
But I think now it's everything. We have to,
yeah,
all bets are off. We really need
yeah.
we really need to work with India closely. There is no other friend at this time, and as a country that we will rely upon more than India. So India has done so much for us. They have they have provided the credit lines. They have also facilitated fast tracking of the IMF negotiations. I think we will need that. But also we need to assure us there is this lot of disinformation in Sri Lanka. Indians are There is Indian
Sending
intervention.
troops,
Indian,
yeah,
yeah, I think that those we have to be dispelled. I think India will and will always respect the sovereignty of small countries, small powers in the Indian Ocean like Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka and India, it matters a lot.
hmm.
It's a civilizational relationship, not just a modern political relationship. So
So,
I think
Doctor
we should, yeah,
Dr. Vidanage, I have two questions here from viewers who have tuned in.
yeah,
Um, One is from Sanjeev Nair. If mobs rule a country, who is going to find solutions, negotiate with bankers and the IMF? This is something you've already kind of
yes.
touched upon, but just because Mr. Nair has asked, I thought
No,
I'll
I think
continue.
it's a question even everybody is asking. People were actually supporting the protesters. Everybody thought I mean, they did a fine job because they represented the common grievances. But protest politics and mobocracy are two different things.
Yeah,
So what
yeah,
we are seeing is the protests morphing into a mobocracy where the mobs and the leaders of the mobs, I mean, especially the leader of the FSP is now coming out and saying, there has to be a kind of a social compact with the protesters, even going ahead. He's trying to kind of say the constitution, the parliament is irrelevant, that
yeah,
whoever
yeah,
is in power. So
absolutely.
that is unacceptable. That is
Yeah,
unacceptable.
that's
If they
dangerous
want,
ground.
if they want, I mean, Sri Lanka will have to ask answer on that on Mr. Nayer's question. Sri Lanka, despite all of this, in in a very short time, have to go for a general election. The
Mm.
parliament is in disarray. The Gotabaya Rajapaksa's political platform is in disarray because he created it was a sudden platform. He didn't have a party. They created something called the Pohoto, the Pojana Peramuna, and that is not a political party. That's kind of a
Yeah, yeah.
political platform. And it was just revolving around his strong leadership. When the leadership collapses, the platform automatically
Collapses.
collapses. The same crisis Macron is facing in France, we are facing it
Mm.
10 times, the same thing, right? He came to power through a movement. The movement has run out of steam, the platform has lost legitimacy. So which means there has to be another electoral, you have
Yeah.
to go to, so because people's, it has to go through the people's, the people. So
Mm.
just because mobs demand, you can't do that. So
Yeah.
yes, yes. So we that is why even the acting president has said no to fascist mobs, no to fascism, no to mobs.
Yep.
I
I
think
noted that. I
he has
noted
gone a
that.
little bit too far calling them fascists, but I think that
He
but
got
the mob
the.
should, yeah, the mob should
I
be
have.
stopped.
There's
Yeah.
another viewer, sir, Savita KL. Are these protests funded by any country? Now, that's a very direct question.
No,
I
it's a
don't know
very
if you have the answer.
no. But the thing is, though it's a direct question, it's very difficult to respond, right? Because for me, I mean, as an academic and as as a strategic studies, head of department, I just can't say yes, countries, but I can give you a cue. The leading element of this, of these hardliners are FSP, the Frontline Socialist Party. It is go back. You can't go to India. Looking at the current Naxal groups and all, there is I think there may be a source of funding. Probably where
Mhm.
there is a radical left wing group, radical left also has certain international compulsions.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I'm sure
Absolutely.
you can make that out.
Mhm. Was there any requirement for President Rajapaksa to have fled? I mean, his brother is there, still there. Their families are there. Namal is there. Why did he have to flee? Was there a fear of his life being?
I think the intelligence community would have told him, because the breach was so unprecedented, so fast,
Yeah.
and if he was there, the protesters would have harmed him. So I'm sure, sure, because people are the sentiment on the ground. So is he was so popular in
Yeah.
2019.
My God, what
He's
a descent.
extreme. So I wrote an article analyzing his rise, Gota's rise,
Hmm.
parallel. That was the first analysis, that in parallel with the Modi, in parallel with Imran Khan, and all these things. South Asian like iron triangle. But now I have to, say Gota's fall is
Yeah.
as phenomenal as the rise. It's a
Yeah.
meteoric rise, and it's a phenomenal fall.
Yeah.
So he's so unpopular. He's so unpopular,
Hmm.
and that is because I think mostly the food security, the decision on organic, totally going organic on a against
Yeah.
fertilizers, that has that has
Terrible.
not terrible. It was and the ill advised, he was significantly ill advised. And then to then I think dealing with so many the other factors. But I think this food security, and of course the fact that he couldn't rectify the economic crisis, and he actually went by the advice of some of the bureaucrats who took our, we had 7 billion in $7 billion in reserves when he came to power. So now we are less than 250 million of US dollars in reserves. So you can see, of course,
Yeah.
he's not totally. And also the certain policies like the cancellation of the LRT, the light rail transit with Japan, which was how. I think they made some blunders in foreign policy. Also made certain countries, the Japanese would never say they are angry with you, but when
Yeah.
you irk Japan, it's very hard. The Indians very well know how to work with the Japanese. And
Yeah.
how sensitive the Japanese are in so
Extremely.
many things.
Extremely.
So
Yeah.
even so you to understand, if you were a political novice in power, you have to take some serious advice, and you have to take
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
serious people who knows that. So I
Yeah.
think there are certain political, policy, personal mistakes that has, so he had to pay the price. And of course that would have compelled. So it's a meteoric rise, phenomenal fall.
Yeah. So, last question. What, apart, you mentioned the credit lines and all that we provided, well and good. What else can India do at this point?
I think India, it's vital for Sri Lanka that India, whatever government that comes to power, India can give a serious assurance of, that India is there for the stability of this country. Because I think political stability remains the number one requirement. It's a necessity of this time. If you
Yeah,
don't have
absolutely.
political stability, so I think India stands. I think Minister Jaishankar has made it clear that India will. But I think this is where we are. It's crucial for us and India for us to and help for us to, and India's continuing interventions with the IMF, trying to help Sri Lanka out of the economic mess, and to provide that, and also in the short run, Sri Lankan military may needs strategic support from India, because we are facing these are unprecedented times. Sri Lanka has never had public uprisings. we
Yeah,
have
yeah.
had we have had arms insurrections and
Mm.
somewhat youth uprisings, but
Yeah, yeah.
the uprisings you see, not today's one but the general one, that's public.
Yeah,
These are Sri
absolutely.
Lankan ordinary citizens. So I think, how do you manage civilian protests and all. These are I think, Sri Lankan military is a very professional outfit, but I think if you go into emergency like today, how do you deal with civilian protests? I think that's a new area for them.
Very tricky. It's very
It's
tricky.
very tricky. So I think, kind of orienting security establishment to that, because Sri Lanka is political establishment is not fundamentally ready for any kind of military solution for the protest. So that
Yeah.
means you can't, military can do a certain level of crowd control, but then beyond that, they're not politically ready. Political
Mhm.
will is very low at this time, because of the economic crisis and the diplomatic situation we are in. So
Yeah.
I think India comes in at that time, because India remains the bulwark, remains the strong democracy, the strong security partner for Sri Lanka. So I think India's political, security, economic roles are all critical for Sri Lanka at this moment, for to
Further
prevent
slide.
the
Yeah.
slide.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are still on the slide. We are still sliding.
Yeah.
People are not realizing that if the protests go on, we are still on the slide. We are not even not stop that. So I think that's
Yeah.
India's role, fundamental role.
Dr. Vidanage, thank you very much. I mean, where does one sum this up? Because this is something which is continuing story, and
It
I
is. It is.
expect we'll come back to it days
Yeah.
ahead. But let's hope things work out next week,
Yes.
the week to watch. Dr.
Yes.
Vidanage, pleasure talking to you again. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you, Surya, for having me. Yes. Thank you so much.
And for those of you who joined us on this conversation, thank you for your comments and observations. We couldn't take all of them given the time involved, but we gotten at least some of them. And Dr. Vidnagi was able to give us a lot of perspective and insight. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media. Many of you are doing that. Thank you and good night.